What's life in 3 words?
Challenging, difficult, and wonderful.
Life can pass us by so quickly, and yet more years does not always equal more wisdom. And so today we speak with author and speaker Darren Bennett, who loves learning, about how to maximize the learning potential in our experiences, good, bad, and ugly. We're going to learn some attitudes, some activities we can use to help us make the most of life. Let's go to that interview now with Darren Bennett. Darren, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Tom, it is an absolute pleasure to be here, mate.
Yes?
I've been looking forward to this for days. Actually,
days?
no, not true.
No,
Weeks, months. Months ago we talked about it.
We did. Finally you're here and it's going to be worth the wait.
I hope so.
So
we'll see.
Well, Darren, when it comes to you, I think you're somebody that is always learning something new about life. And
So
therefore
true.
a student of life. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Well, I would actually. Yes, I think as a teacher for many years, I came to appreciate the power of learning and the value of learning. Firstly, in the actual classroom, where I was teaching mainly 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and I saw what worked and what didn't, and yeah, I had a fascination for learning, to be honest, to the point where I guess my goal in as a classroom teacher was to see individuals who perhaps struggled with a particular concept or a subject matter go from, sort of below average perhaps to average to excellent. And I had that quest to help students learn better. And when as I moved into general life, I realised that, hang on, the classroom is a place of learning. Mm-hmm. But, hey, we don't stop learning when we leave school.
That's right.
We don't.
Well,
and so there are so many ways in which we can, I guess for want of a better word, learn a lesson, Tom. And not every lesson is hard won by. There are ways in which we can learn quite easily. Mm. So I am fascinated by the subject of learning, yes. And I am a student of, not just a student of learning, but a student of life, because let's face it, we all have experiences.
Yes.
And I guess the ultimate question that we have to ask is, can we learn anything from these experiences?
Yeah, I guess that you can take any experience, and if you get through it and you've learned something, then it's not a wasted experience.
Well, that's it. And so it's a matter of finding out, well, hang on, I've just gone through this terrible ordeal, whatever it might be. I reflect on one experience. For example, I found out when I was 32 that I had diabetes type 2.
Yeah.
And that was an absolute shock because I was fairly fit, skinny as a rake, and it really hit me. And I denied it. In fact, I didn't go back to the doctor for 10 years. And then I went back. I was forced to go back and face this terrible thing. The issue around it was that I had some real challenges, and I had to learn to adapt, to look at the good from this illness.
Yes.
I know I'm not going to say illnesses are good. I'm saying what I've learned from having this illness has been good for me in terms of my, what I eat, exercising, looking after my health, going to the doctors, that type of thing.
So you would say more good has come out of it than bad?
Look, yes, I'd have to say that. In saying that, if I had a preference,
yes, you wouldn't have it.
Yes, have diabetes and learn these lessons, or no, I wouldn't have diabetes, and no, I definitely choose not to have diabetes. And but you know what, what can I do? I do whatever my doctor tells me to do, and I've somehow over several years maintained some level of reasonable health. to ensure that I guess, worked through that. And it takes a lot of. I've had to learn a heck of a lot, to be honest.
Well, that's right. Often there's a prompt to require you to learn. Usually, if you're not engaged in the subject at all, it's outside your experience, you have no interest. But suddenly, a health issue of some sort, and you research a lot, you find out everything you can know, you become an expert on that topic.
That is true. And so that's just one of several challenges that I've had to deal with in my life, where I've sort of reflected on it and thought, there are lessons that I've learned from it. So,
do you think learning is always painful?
No, I don't. And that's the good thing, is that there are ways to learn, and as an example, by simply observing, Tom. That's right. You can learn a lesson by observing, by looking at other people, by listening to what other people have to say, by so many ways. But let's just look at observing. You have people in your life, family, friends, people on TV, the social media is everywhere. There are people out there living life, going through good and going through hard. We can learn from these people. We can learn. We can grow from other people. But the problem I think I've found, even with myself, I've learned some really hard lessons. For example, in the areas of finance. I made some terrible mistakes many years ago, and it cost me a fortune. All right, and I learned a massive lesson from that challenge. Now that's another challenge, but you know what? In hindsight, since then I regularly see a financial advisor, and this person provides me with incredibly accurate, very good advice, which I have followed to the letter of the law for the past 10 or so years, and it has been a game changer for me. And so I guess the point is, what would have been better? It would have been better for me to listen to my financial advisor before I made these silly, brash mistakes of investing in certain areas, which cost me a lot of money.
Or getting a financial advisor to begin with.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And so one of the key areas I think that you can learn from is experts. That's right. Listening to people, listening to experts. I don't know what it is about Australians, but we just think we know it all. We got it all together. We know what's best, but we don't. And why don't we listen to experts? Now, I've just joined a gym, for example. Yes, a gym.
Well done.
And I'm trying to figure out how to use the machines. I'm trying to figure out the best program. And so what am I doing? I've employed, or I've engaged, a personal trainer just for a few sessions. But this person is brilliant at showing me exactly how to use the various machines.
So don't try and figure it out yourself. Find somebody who's an expert.
That's one way we can learn.
Are you an expert in any area, Darren?
No.
If you had to say you're an expert in something?
Well, I'll say that perhaps I'm an no, I'm not going to say I'm an expert. I'm an expert in learning from...
That's why we're here to talk to you.
From
Excellent.
life and all that life presents to us.
You're an expert on learning. It's
a
good thing to be an expert on, Darren. So what are the keys to not making more mistakes than necessary and learning life's lessons quickly?
Well, it's a good question, and I think the answer is in the questions that we ask of key people in our life. And so effectively, yes, I think at the very outset, it really is being curious and asking good questions and listening well. These are critical elements that reflect a person who has some level of humility in their life. And I cannot speak highly enough of the importance of the character quality of humility in learning. Recognizing that you don't know it all, that you aren't an expert, that you haven't got it all together, and it is worthwhile pursuing experts, people who know, to become better at whatever it is you want to improve in. And let's just talk about the big gun things, your health, for example. your financial well-being, your spiritual life. There's so many elements that we can learn and grow from. And, I attend a church, Catalyst Church, and, I attend for several reasons. And I love the fellowship, I love friendship, the company, the worship, the small group life. But I am also endeared and I passionately engage with the teaching and the preaching that comes to us Sunday by Sunday. There's so much we can learn from listening to people who know. And so, I'm feeding, I guess, my spiritual soul by listening and reflecting and then perhaps acting, doing what has been the application of what is being said.
That's the key in it all, the humility to listen and then the humility also to put it into practice.
Yeah, that's right.
To reflect on it, to take the time, because you can listen to wonderful stuff, go to a conference all week and absorb all this stuff, but then carry on as you were before.
Well, that's right.
I think that's all too common.
Yes, so true, and I think it's so important to, and there's another method of learning, obviously, and that is practicing and actually stepping out of the boat. Being bolder, being courageous, and I honestly believe in the need for us to. Yes, it's great to listen. It's great to be curious. It's great to ask those really important questions in life of those who know better. And I also mentioned earlier about observing other people's lives, and copying them. There's nothing wrong with imitating a person of good character, a person who perhaps speaks to their wife in a certain way or treats them in a certain way. I'm talking obviously positively, or the way they look after their children. So observation, I want to include as being a critical element to learning and growing in every area of life. Because hey, every day we see people. We interact with people. We see our neighbours. We see our friends. We go down the shops, so there's so much.
Intentionality about the people that we are with.
Well, that helps too. Clearly, if you are hanging around the right people, you're perhaps there's going to be a little bit of their character, I guess, what they've learned in life, and, rub off on you. And so, choosing, people that you... you don't always get to choose your family. You don't get to choose your family. And sometimes, so you can't always choose that, but you can choose to hang out with people, I guess, who perhaps reflect some character traits that are important to you.
How do you avoid the situation where you're only hanging around with one type of person, with one type of view, and you're not exposed to maybe some other truths out there?
Well, it's a reality that, as I mentioned, you don't get to choose your family. And I think it's important for us to be mixing with all kinds of people. But, and I guess in a sense, it's ultimately choosing the meals that you enjoy more than others. We all have to eat our vegetables and some of us don't like veggies. So there are going to be people we're going to be interacting with that aren't necessarily going to agree with our views or our beliefs or our character even, and so we can even, to be truthful, learn from these people as well.
Yes.
Learning is a never-ending quest, and there's an old saying, and you've been in the teaching game yourself, Tom. Lifelong learning. Right? Being a lifelong learner is a big ticket thing within education, but I believe also in life, no matter how young or old, there is always something we can learn.
An attitude thing.
That is right, and I'm a strong advocate for having the right character, but then applying, and as I mentioned, practicing, stepping out, being bolder. And for example, when I was at uni, I had a friend. His name was Mylan, and Mylan said to me, Darren, you want to go, and talk about Christian life with people, in lunchtimes? And I said, why not? And so next thing we're talking to people about Christianity and we got a lot of kickback. I remember walking into the staff room and there was a bunch of lecturers there, and Mylan said, hey Darren, we should go and talk to the uni lecturers. And I said, why not? And so, next thing you know, I'm engaged with these university lecturers talking about all kinds of things, Christianity, whatever. They ripped into us big time, mate. They told us to get out. We don't want to ever see you here again.
Really?
But, look, I thought, well, look, we had to go, But a friend asked me to do something, and I had to go. And it didn't always work. But true story, several months later, one of the guys that we spoke to under a palm tree, at uni in a lunchtime, we spoke to them about Christianity, and he was massively, he didn't want to know a thing about it. But we he did ask a couple of questions, and we ended up having a brief conversation with him. And several months later, I was at a church meeting, a Christian meeting, and lo and behold, this guy comes up and says, "Hey, Darren, I've become a Christian. Just letting you know." And and off he went. I never saw him again. But I just thought, and he did say something about how it had something to do with, I remember that palm tree and the experience and the conversation. And I thought, you know what? It wouldn't have happened had I not said, why not? So, I learned a valuable lesson for that. Sometimes, if someone asks you to do something, hey, you might say, why not?
Yes. Yeah, why not? That's a good
not
one.
Not to everything, though. You can't do everything in life.
It sounds really good, Darren, but there might be someone right now that is in the middle of a crisis or in a challenge where they're not sure if it's worth continuing.
Yes.
When you're in the midst of it, it's all good in hindsight, but in the midst of it, how do you get through that? How do you find that voice of encouragement
Well, it ain't easy. I'm not saying there's an easy road for somebody who's in the middle of a storm or a great challenge in their life. And I've been in several physical, real storms, but others, of great significance, personally. And there are times when, you feel like you're in the middle of it. And, the thing that keeps me going in the middle of the storms and the challenges is belief. It's hope. It's hope for a better future. It's belief that this is not forever. It's holding on to hope. And I know there is a Bible verse that says hope is the anchor of the soul. And when you have hope, it somehow holds you, keeps you grounded. It somehow helps you to hang on for dear life sometimes. And I mean dear life. And if it takes hanging on for dear life, you do whatever you can. What does that mean, do whatever you can? It means you get on your knees and you cry out to God for help. And it may well be just a simple prayer for God, help me. No matter whether a person is a Christian or not, that is a brilliant prayer to pray. And I've prayed it possibly hundreds, if not thousands of times, Tom. Getting along, asking for help from people who can really help you, professionals even if need be. Standing on that belief that this is for a season. This is not permanent. We will get through this.
All right, Darren, maybe one of the last questions. Let's see how succinctly you can answer this one. So let's just say there's a 20-year reunion and you go in there and some people are exactly the same as they were 20 years ago. Some people, completely different. New people, new adventures. What's the difference between those two situations, those two people?
Well, I think the short answer is that there are some who've learned in the classroom called life, what I call the classroom called life, and there are others who perhaps haven't. And I would say that probably, if on balance, both sets of people have experienced the same different sorts of challenges, some perhaps more serious than others, but in the end, I don't know. I think people who have a sense of humility and a willingness to learn and grow and ask questions, I think what you see in them is a faster acceleration in their growth. And I've seen that firsthand in the classroom. When students really listen, when they ask questions and they're curious, when they're really, they almost in your face, Mr. Bennett, help me with this, help me with that, show me this way, show me that way. They're eager, they're enthusiastic. They're the ones that end up with the grades, the good grades. And there are some students who are just completely disengaged, not interested, and I don't treat them any differently. I do my absolute best to engage them, and but they don't learn, they don't change, and they go on and do different things. I don't know. So I think, in short, it's how we've learned from the experiences that we have in life.
Well, from my experience, I've seen two types of people that aren't learning, and one would be the person that's given up. It's just too hard, and too much. Life has thrown too much at them, and they've given up. The other one is the person who has had success and popularity and everything going for them early on. And from my reunion that I had not too long ago, it was those people that were, the ones that were doing well at school, the popular ones, they were most the same. And I wonder if that's because they didn't have that drive that comes with not having it go your own way early on.
Perhaps that is the case, Tom. I think there's a third person in there.
Yes.
And that's a me person. And, I didn't do so well at school, I'll be honest. And funnily enough, I had a teacher, one of the best teachers in Australia, actually, Mrs. Foggo, and she won an Order of Australia medal. She, outstanding teacher over many years, won several awards, rose through the ranks, and she was my teacher. She was my Australian history teacher. And she wrote on, and you'd think that if you've got the very best teacher in the world sitting in your class, or standing there before you in the classroom, you'd think that you would do well. You would learn a lot.
You would.
However, I only managed a C- in her class, and I had her for a few years, and that was the best grade I could get. And one report card, I guess, summarised my problem, and that was, Darren is continuously distracted with other things going on in his life. And I realised sometimes, for whatever reason, I was interested in Australian history, and I still am. I love Australian history. So I was interested, but I was too distracted. I was too interested in other things, in girls, in playing sport, in having fun. Yeah. I was too immature. I wasn't ready. So
that's a good one, Darren. Too distracted
to
learn the lessons.
And that's another issue that
you have
to work through in learning from all of life's experiences.
That's often the temptation. When there's something painful or needs our attention, we find distraction. Absolutely,
yes.
Well, Darren, it's been good. You're an author. I nearly forgot to mention. Darren, you've written a couple of books around this topic of learning from life. And,
yes, I've written. Well, I've one book published in beginning of 2021, and I'm about to release my second book. And
what's it called?
It's called. Well, the first book was called The Classroom Called Life.
Yep.
And the second book is called The Classroom Called Life 2. That's right. So it's about to be released September the 30th. I just happen to have a copy of it here, John.
That's fortunate, Darren.
And there it is. So yes, it's The Classroom Called Life 2. And I'm really excited about this book because I share essentially 40 chapters, 40 lessons, 40 more lessons that I've learned in The Classroom Called Life. And there's some pretty hard lessons that I've shared. I've been pretty vulnerable, real, but hopefully when people read it, they'll experience some joy and some fun, because there's always a bit of humour in most of my stories. Interestingly, I share a little bit about how I wrote my first book. I share a bit about my experiences in being a married man.
Yeah.
I share a little bit about what I learned from being a father, and I share a little bit about my own personal devotional life, and so I talk about prayer. So there's a whole lot of eclectic topics in this book. So I'm really excited about it. I feel like it's a better book than the first one. It's crisper.
You've learned a lot.
Well, I've had to look. Yes, exactly. I'm still learning. I'll be honest. I'm still learning to be a good writer. I don't feel that I'm there. I'm still learning. Right now, I've just completed my second draft of my first fiction book. So I'm very excited about that as well. That will be released next year. But in the meantime, this book, yes, coming out late September. So stay tuned.
Fantastic.
For that.
You're passionate about learning. I know that you have been learning a lot about being a good author, just from the things that you tell me, the podcasts that you hear when you hop in your car, Darren. That's another thing that we've probably just touched on at the end, the passion, the enthusiasm to learn about something.
Well, it's a very good point, Tom. You're right. Ultimately, you've got to have an interest in something, don't you?
Yeah.
And you've got to really want it. And I remember probably 5-6 years ago thinking to myself, I'd love to write a book. In fact, several years ago. And I'd love to write. I'd love to publish a book. And I had no grand aspirations, in all honesty. It was more so that one day my grandchildren can read a little bit of my life, of our life, and a little bit of the sort of experiences that I've had and some of the lessons that I've learned. And that evolved into something. And I had to do a huge amount of learning around what it means to be an indie author, what it means to self-publish. It's not just about the writing. Yeah. And so I'm actually, in that process, yes, it does require listening to podcasts, attending courses, going to conferences. And I'm looking forward to going to a writers' conference, a Christian writers' conference in October, actually. And so it's a never-ending journey, Tom.
That's
and sometimes you can get a little bit fatigued where you need to just pause, take a break, chill a bit, refresh, read a good book, enjoy it, and then come back to it, Writing a book is a bit like a marathon, Tom, and you know what it's like to run a marathon. And it is a journey. It is a journey that takes you over 1,000 hills.
Yes.
But in the end, the joy of seeing that book written, published, and completed, and in the hands of people, and enjoying what you've written, just is incredible. It means the world to me. And it's not, as I said, it's not about the money, because seriously, unless you're, Dan Brown or David Baldacci, there's not a lot of money in writing, but it's the joy that it brings me great joy. And so I'm going to continue to journey on that learning path of being better at the new craft of writing that I've sort of engaged with in recent years.
Well, who knows? If you stay on this learning path, where you could end up. Darren Bennett, you might be hearing that name.
I don't know about that, Tom, but
on the bestsellers list.
We'll see.
Oh, pleasure talking to you, Darren.
Been a delight to be with you, Tom.
I wonder what it was that stood out to you from our conversation about learning today with Darren. Maybe you could write it down so you don't forget, or even better, put it in the comments so we can start a discussion. You're listening to the Figuring Life Out Together podcast, and feel free to check out some of our other exciting interviews on all sorts of topics about life, learning from each other. That's what it's all about. And if something was learned today by you, maybe you could share it with somebody else to pass that on. Fantastic if you do. Let us know, reach out. Our website's haventogether.com. Always welcome a message from our listeners. Otherwise, I hope you can join us again next time.